Snow fell over Ashenmore like ash from a dying fire. Varric Ducksbane rode through it without slowing, and the cold found nothing in him it could reach. He had crossed half the valley before he admitted he had no reason to. No council waited. No hunt, no war, no border burning. There was only the servants' quarter at the frozen edge of the royal grounds, and a pressure behind his ribs that had refused to leave him alone since the morning bells. His wolf had been pacing since dawn, restless, listening. It had started the moment one place, at the lower hearths, sat empty, its stool cold, its work undone. A scarred girl who scrubbed the underhalls had not come. The one who never speaks? Lord Thurston had waved a ringed hand across the breakfast table. Bored already. She's just a scarred servant, nephew. Their kind wander off. They always do. And the terrible thing was that Varric had said those same words himself. Not a week past. Had said them, and laughed. A careless, kingly laugh. The laugh of a man who had never once had to look twice at anyone. So, why did his wolf snarl now, low and furious, at the sound of her being waved away? He didn't know. He only knew that when he called her to mind, the crooked scars down one cheek, the eyes she kept forever lowered, something ancient turned over inside him. Not desire, not pity. Something older than either. Something that felt, absurdly, like recognition. The wind changed. His stallion threw its head and balked, and that was when Varric caught it, threaded fine through the clean nothing of the snow. Blood. A great deal of it. The scent pulled him to the old washhouse behind the servants' quarter, a squat stone shed, no one used once the frost came. Its door hung from a single hinge. Varric was off his horse before it had fully stopped. He shouldered the door aside and went still. The room had been torn apart. The great stone basin lay split in two. Shelves had been ripped from the walls and flung. Frost and dark stains ran together across the floor, and the cold iron smell of a struggle filled his skull, until the whole world narrowed to one still point. Two men lay slumped against the far wall, masked, armed, not moving. One had long marks raked across his chest clean through boiled leather, as though something with claws had struck him down. No blade made a mark like that. No human hand did. Servants did not do this, his mind said. Servants could not. And in the ruin at the center of it all lay the scarred girl. She was crumpled on her side, one arm bent at an angle. Arms did not bend. Her plain gray dress torn at the shoulder. Both halves of her face, the smooth and the scarred alike, were darkened with bruises. Snow sifted through the broken roof and settled in her hair without melting, as though even the cold had decided to be gentle with her. Something climbed out of Varric's throat. Not a shout, not a word. A sound with a wolf coiled inside it. Power broke off him in a wave. The cracked basin split further. Frost raced up the walls, in white feathers. The roof beams groaned overhead, and his eyes went from gray to burning gold. In the dark of the shed, while his wolf howled one thing, over and over, through every vein he had, "Guard her, guard her, guard her." He was on his knees at her side, without any memory of crossing the floor. His hands that had broken armies, shook as they searched the ruined line of her throat. There. A pulse, faint as a moth beating against glass, but there. Alive. The relief that went through him was so violent it frightened him, because he had no right to it. He had spoken to this woman twice in his life, perhaps 3 times. She was no one. She was nothing. She was. For half a heartbeat, as he cradled the back of her head, a thread of pale light seemed to move beneath her skin, silver like moonlight, caught under ice, closing over the torn edge of the wound at her temple. Then it was gone, and he told himself the cold had played a trick on his eyes. A sound stopped every thought he had, small, high, a held breath, breaking somewhere close. Varric went perfectly still, so did the thing inside him. The sound came again, a whimper quickly bitten off. The sound of a creature that had already learned far too young that crying was a thing that got you found. It came from the low cupboard wedged beneath the shattered shelves. Its door lashed shut with a length of drying cord. He crossed the room. The cord snapped like a cobweb in his fingers. Slowly he drew the little door open. Darkness. Then two eyes opened in the dark and turned up to him. And Varric forgot how to breathe. A child, no more than 5 winters old. A girl, thin as a winter sparrow, folded into the smallest shape a body could fold. Tears had frozen along her lashes, but it was not her fear that stopped his heart. It was her eyes. Not brown, not gold like a wolf's. Silver, pale and luminous as moonlight on deep water. Silver, the way frost is silver. The color of a bloodline the whole of the North swore had been scoured from the earth 30 years before Varric was ever born. He knew those eyes only from paintings, from old tapestries kept locked in the sealed east wing, from a single story his father had told him once, in a low voice, and forbidden him ever to repeat: the white wolves, the moon-blessed line. Every last one of them burned out of the world. It was not possible. The little girl's lip trembled, her silver gaze slid past him, to the broken woman on the floor and came back to the crown mark stitched at his collar, and in a whisper, worn thin as old thread, she asked the only question that mattered. "Are you the one who comes to finish it?" He rode back through the snow with the woman in his arms, and the child pressed to her side, and not once did the little girl let go of her sleeve. She would not look at him. She watched the sky, the trees, the widening road, everything but the king who carried them, and each time his eyes found her small frozen face, she flinched as though his very attention might burn. Fear, distrust, and beneath both, threaded through her scent, something Varric had no name for and could not shake. She was afraid of him the way one is afraid of a thing one already knows. The palace gates stood open before he called for them. Guards straightened, servants stopped mid-step, and the whisper moved through the courtyard faster than he did. From mouth to mouth, hush to hush. The scarred one, the mute girl from the underhalls, the one no one ever looked at twice. That was the thing Varric noticed, even through his rage. Every soul in that yard knew her, and not one of them had ever truly seen her. She had scrubbed their floors and carried their coal, and passed them like a shadow on a wall for years, invisible in plain sight. Now they crowded to stare, because a woman who had never once been worth a glance was bleeding out in the arms of their king, and no one could understand why he had gone to her himself. Varric could not understand it either. That was becoming the problem. "Move," he said, and the single word emptied the corridor to the healing hall. They laid her on the long stone bed. Healers swarmed, and the moment careful hands tried to draw the child aside, the little girl came apart, not screaming, not thrashing, but a low animal keening that lifted the hair on every arm in the room. She fought free of them, flung herself back to the bedside, and locked both tiny hands around the woman's limp fingers. Only then did the sound stop. Only then did the raw fear bleed slowly out of her scent. She did not fear the healers, Varric noted, not the guards, not even him. Now that he had set her down, she feared being made to let go, as though she had already learned, once, that letting go was how you lost someone forever. Old Alden came last, the eldest of the palace healers, his hands steady with 50 years of steadiness. He bent to the woman's wounds, and Varric watched the color drain slowly from his face. "Your Majesty!" Alden's voice had gone strange. "The men who did this, the guards say they carried steel, trained blades." He drew back the torn gray sleeve and stopped. "But these are not blade wounds she gave them. And this," his finger hovered over an old deliberate scar that ran across the woman's shoulder, silver white and star-shaped. "This was not made by any weapon I know. This was burned into her on purpose, to cover something beneath it." Then his gaze lifted to the child, to the silver eyes watching him back, and the old man forgot his king entirely. His lips moved around a word he plainly had not spoken aloud in 30 years. The name of a house, A line, a legend the crown had buried. And when he found Varric's face again, he was pale as the snow melting from the king's cloak. "Forgive me, Majesty." He could barely say it. "But what is she?" Varric did not answer, because for the first time in more years than he could count, he wanted an answer to something, with an intensity that scared him. Not the polished curiosity of a king, a hunger. His wolf had gone, silent and fixed, every part of it aimed at the woman on the bed, like an arrow drawn to full tension. And somewhere far back in his memory, a locked door he had never questioned rattled once on its hinges. A sealed east wing, a tapestry turned to the wall, his father's low, forbidden voice. He shut his eyes against a sudden, splitting ache behind them, and when he opened them, the door was shut again and the memory gone. "Guard this hall," he told the captain. "No one enters without my word. No one. Not a healer, not a lord." His eyes moved to the child, and to the woman whose faint pulse he could still feel echoing in his own chest. "Not the regent. Not my betrothed, no one." The captain bowed, and did not ask why the king's own family had made his list. Varric could not have said either. Only that his wolf had put them there, and in all his years of war and rule, that instinct had never once led him wrong. Far across the palace, in a warm room hung with tapestries, a breathless servant delivered the news that a scarred girl from the underhalls had been carried in half dead, and that a small child with eyes like poured moonlight had been found hidden at her side. Lord Thurston set down his wine very slowly. For a long moment he did not move at all. Then, in a voice gone quiet and cold as the grave, he said the words that would haunt everything that came after. "That is not possible." We salted the ground where that line fell. We left nothing alive to grow. The doors of the healing hall opened without a knock. Varric did not turn. He did not need to. His wolf had lunged to its feet the instant the latch lifted, hackles high, a growl gathering in him that he had to close his teeth against, because the woman crossing the threshold was the woman he was to marry beneath the winter moon in 9 days' time. Varric, Cressida of the Highfell, said his name like a caress, and swept toward him in a rustle of gray silk. She was, as ever, flawless pale hair braided with river pearls, her composure, the composure of a woman who had never once in her life been told no. "The whole palace is in an uproar. They're saying you carried a servant in your own arms. That you've sealed a wing of my future home over some underhall girl who—" She stopped. Her eyes had found the child. And Varric, who had spent 3 years learning to read the small dishonest weather of Cressida's face, watched something move across it that he had never seen there before. Not annoyance. Not the cool disdain she kept for anyone born below a certain hall. Something that flickered up from far beneath all of that, fast, and was smoothed away almost before it surfaced. Fear. The little girl had gone rigid on the bed. She pressed herself flat against her mother's ruined side, her silver eyes fixed on Cressida, and from her small chest came a sound so low it was barely a sound at all, a note of pure animal warning, the growl of a creature that has recognized a predator across a great distance of years. She had not made that sound for the healers, nor the guards, nor for Varric himself, only for Cressida. "Interesting," said the cold, clear part of his mind that had kept him alive through 2 wars. "What a strange little thing," Cressida murmured, recovering, her smile sliding back into place like a mask lifted onto a face. "Where on earth did it come from?" "She," Varric said quietly, "was found half frozen in a locked cupboard, hidden by her mother, who is currently bleeding through 3 of my healer's hands. So you will forgive me if I do not care for the word it." The room went very still. Cressida's smile did not waver, but a small muscle jumped once at the corner of her jaw. Then the second visitor arrived, and the temperature of the hall dropped further still. Lord Thurston Duskbane did not sweep. He did not rustle. The regent moved the way old ice moves on a deep river, slow, silent, and carrying more weight beneath the surface than above it. He had ruled Ashenmore, in all but name, through the long years of Varric's boyhood. And even now, with his nephew grown and crowned, the whole court still bent toward him out of a habit 30 years deep. Nephew? Thurston's gaze passed over the woman on the bed, with the mild disinterest of a man appraising a lamed horse. Then it reached the child, and stopped. Varric was watching for it this time. And so he saw the thing his uncle could not entirely hide. The sudden, total stillness that came over him. The way a man goes still when he steps in the dark on something he was told was already dead. Thurston's eyes moved over the silver of the child's. Once, and when they lifted again, they had gone flat and depthless as a frozen pond. A poor foundling and her whelp, the regent said smoothly. Tragic. I'll have them moved to the lower infirmary where such cases are. They stay, Varric said. Varric. They stay, he said again, and this time he let a thread of the alpha into it, and the windows shivered in their leads. Thurston inclined his head, the small, patient bow of a man who has learned to lose a single move in a game he is certain of winning. But as he straightened, his eyes met Cressida's across the length of the hall. It lasted less than a heartbeat. A glance, nothing more, of the kind that passes between two people who share a secret and have just discovered it, is not as varied as they believed. Most men would have missed it. Varric did not. His wolf did not, and something in the pit of him went cold and certain and quiet. It was old Alden who broke the silence, and he did it without meaning to. He had drawn a basin of warm water to clean the woman's wounds, and as the grime of the wash-house floor lifted away, more of her began to show through, and the old healer's breath caught audibly in his throat. "These are not fresh," he said, half to himself, tracing the faint, silvered lines that laced her back where the dress had torn. Merciful moon. Some of these are years old. She's been... He stopped, swallowed, looked up at his king with something like horror. Majesty, whoever those men in the wash-house were, they did not begin this today. This woman has been hunted for a very long time. And someone long ago went to terrible trouble to burn the truth of who she is straight off her skin. The words landed in the hall like a stone dropped into a still well. And across that hall, hidden behind two faces that had spent 30 years learning to hide, Thurston and Cressida did the smallest, most careful thing of all. Neither of them looked surprised. She woke in the deep gray hour before dawn, and the first thing she did was reach for a knife that was not there. Varric had not left. He had told himself a dozen sound and kingly reasons to stay. The security of the wing, the value of a witness, the mystery of the men in the wash-house, and every one of them was a lie, and he knew it. He had stayed because he could not make himself go. So he saw the exact moment the woman's eyes opened, saw the confusion in them, then the terror, then, faster than any wounded thing should be able to move, the surge as she lunged half upright, one arm flung across the sleeping child at her side, her whole broken body turning itself into a wall between her daughter and the room. Wren, the name tore out of her, cracked and desperate. She's safe. Varric rose slowly, his palms open, the way one approaches a snared wolf. She's here, she hasn't left your side. Look, she's sleeping. The woman looked, and when she saw the small shape breathing quietly against her, curled around a fistful of her sleeve, something in her simply broke open. Relief poured through her, so total that her wounded arm gave way and she sagged, and Varric moved to catch her, without deciding to, and she flinched from his hands as though they were a brand. Don't. It was barely a whisper, but it stopped him cold. He had been reached for by the greatest healers in the north, and never flinched. He had held dying men. And this half-dead servant girl looked at his outstretched hands as though they were the last thing in the world she would ever allow to touch her. "You've been unconscious 2 days," he said, lowering them slowly. "The men who hurt you are dead. You're under the protection of the crown." She laughed. It was a terrible sound, soundless, really more a shudder of the shoulders than a laugh, and it was the most bitter thing Varric had ever heard. She lifted her ruined face to him at last, and he saw that her eyes were not lowered now. For the first time in all the years she had scrubbed his floors, the scarred girl was looking directly at her king. And what was in her eyes was not fear. It was hatred, old, banked, bottomless hatred, the kind that does not flare, because it has been burning too long and too low for flame. It was the hatred of someone who has waited a very long time for a particular face and has just discovered that face bending over her with false kindness. It made no sense. He had never harmed this woman. He was almost certain he had never once spoken to her beyond an order given without looking, and yet she looked at him as though he, personally, had put every scar on her body with his own hands. "The protection of the crown?" she repeated. Her voice was a ruin, rough, disused, the voice of someone who had made herself silent for years and was only now remembering how words worked. "Do you know, Majesty, that is the funniest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time." "You speak?" Vadek said, before he could stop himself. "The household says you're mute." "The household," she said, "believes what is safest to believe. As do you." She drew the sleeping child closer, and the movement cost her, and she did not let it show. "There is nothing I wish to say to you. There has not been for 6 years. Send us home, and forget you ever troubled yourself. You have no home. It's a locked cupboard, in a broken wash-house, and 2 dead men on the floor. Then we'll find another." Her chin lifted. "We always do, we." Varric's wolf pressed hard against his ribs. There it was again. That certainty in her, that she and this child needed no one, would kneel to no one, would rather crawl into the snow than take a hand from him. "What is your name?" he asked. She was silent so long, he thought she would not answer. "Sorrel," she said finally, "just that. No house, no father's line, nothing to hang it on. The flat, deliberate namelessness of someone who had shed everything that could be traced. It's the only true thing I'll give you. Take it and go." The child stirred, then woke, and the instant her silver eyes found her mother's face awake and living, the little girl made a sound of such pure, unguarded joy that it cut through the whole cold room like a bell. "Mama." Wren flung both arms around Sorrel's neck. "You came back. You came back. I thought you went where Papa went and didn't come back." Varric saw Sorrel's whole body flinch at the word, Papa. And he saw, too, the look Sorrel shot him over her daughter's head, swift, involuntary, and drenched in a grief so raw it stole the breath from his lungs. It was gone in an instant, buried under the hatred again, like a coal under ash. But it had been there, he had seen it. She looked at him, the king who had ordered her family destroyed, and did not remember it, as though he were the answer to a question that had ruined her life. Varric did not go back to his war room. He went back to the sealed wing. He told himself it was the investigation. In truth, he could not stay away from the child. For 3 days he found reasons: a healer to check on, a report to hear, a guard to question, and every one of them ended in the same warm room, in the chair by the hearth, watching a small silver-eyed girl who would not at first come near him. Sorrel slept in ragged snatches and woke, gasping. Alden kept her fevered and still. So it was Wren, in the long quiet hours, who slowly, warily, began to fill the silence, the way children do, dropping small, terrible truths into a room without any idea of their weight. On the first day, she showed him her stones. She had a pouch of them, smooth river pebbles, and she laid them out on the hearthstones in careful rows, while Varric pretended to read. He asked, at last, what they were. "Wolves," she said, not looking up. She touched the largest. "This is the biggest. This is the one who guards." She touched the smallest, set a little apart from the rest, alone at the edge of the stone. "This one is white. Why is the white one all alone?" Wren considered this with the grave seriousness of the very young. Because there's only one left, she said. Mama says the white ones all went to sleep in the ground a long time ago, and they never woke up. She moved the little pale stone an inch closer to the others, then frowning moved it back to its place at the edge. But this one didn't go to sleep. This one has to hide. Varric sat very still. Hide from what? The child looked up at him, then silver eyes wide and clear, and said the thing that turned his blood to meltwater. From the man in the walls, she said simply. The one who watches. Mama says he already ate all the other white wolves. And he's still hungry. On the second day, she told him about the road. He had asked, carelessly, why her mother slept so poorly. Wren was drawing a lopsided wolf on a scrap of vellum, and did not stop. Because she's listening, the girl said. Listening for what? For the one who was supposed to come back. Wren pressed too hard and tore the vellum and did not seem to mind. Every night Mama looks out the window at the road. She says she isn't looking, but she always looks. A small pause. I think she's waiting for somebody who forgot her. The words went through Varric, like a blade of ice. Somebody who forgot her. A pain lanced up from the back of his skull, sudden and blinding, and behind it, for less than a heartbeat, something moved. Silver trees, a voice, the smell of snow and smoke together. A woman laughing, once low and bright, in a place he had never been. Then the pain crested, and the image was gone, leaving nothing but a headache, and the sick certainty that he had reached for something, and it had slipped through his fingers. He pressed his knuckles to his temple. When he opened his eyes, Wren was watching him with the unnerving attention of a child who sees more than she is meant to. Your head hurts, she observed. Yes, Mama's does too, when she tries to remember the good part. Wren returned to her drawing. She says some things get taken out of you so you'll stop looking for them. Some things get taken out of you. He sat with that a long while, the fire ticking low in the grate, the child humming tunelessly over her wolves. Then, because he could not help himself, he asked the thing he should not have asked, a child. Wren. The good part. Your mother tries to remember. Do you know what it is? The little girl thought about it, chewing the end of her charcoal. A man, she said at last, in the story she tells at night, when she thinks I'm sleeping. A man came out of the snow one winter, all broken, and Mama fixed him, and he was kind, and he was funny, and he stayed a long time, and then he went away to fetch something. She frowned down at her drawing, and the story stops there. Every time. She never finishes it. I don't think she knows how it ends. Varric's hands had gone cold. Does the man in the story have a name? Mama won't say it. Wren lowered her voice, as though sharing something forbidden. She says if she says his name out loud, her heart will remember how much it hurts, and then she won't be able to get up in the morning to take care of me. She looked up, and for a moment she seemed far older than her 5 winters. So, she keeps it inside where it's quiet, but sometimes at night, I hear her say it into her pillow anyway. The ache behind Varric's eyes flared white-hot, and this time a single sound surfaced with it before it drowned again. Not a word, not quite, but the shape of one. In a woman's voice, warm and teasing, and gone. He pressed his palm flat to the mantel to keep himself upright. On the 3rd day, the door opened without a knock, and Cressida stood in it. She had come, she said, to see whether her betrothed intended to spend his every waking hour nursing Underhall foundlings, so close to their wedding. But her eyes were on the child the whole time she spoke, and the child had gone silent and small the instant the door moved, retreating to the hearth's far corner, watching the beautiful woman the way a mouse watches the shadow of a hawk. You've become quite the devoted nursemaid, Cressida said, her voice light and her smile tight. People are beginning to talk, Varric, a king, a scarred servant, her strange little foundling. It's not. Careful, Varric said. Just the one word, but his wolf was in it, and Cressida heard the wolf, and for the second time in 3 days, Varric watched raw fear cross her lovely face, swift and quickly mastered, not jealousy. He noted it with the cold precision that was becoming a drumbeat under everything. A woman who feared to lose her king would be jealous. Cressida was not jealous. Cressida was afraid of a broken servant and a small child, and a woman was only ever that afraid of something that could destroy her. "Why do you care so much?" Cressida asked at last, and there was something almost pleading in it, almost desperate. "She's no one, Varric. She's a scar and a scrubbing brush. Why can't you leave her in the dark where she belongs?" Varric opened his mouth to answer, and found, with a slow and dawning horror, that he could not. He did not know. He only knew that when he looked at the sleeping woman and her hidden child, every instinct he owned rose up and howled that something had been stolen from him, something enormous, something whose shape he could feel in the dark like a missing tooth, and that the people who had taken it were closer to him than his own blood. He said none of this. He said only, "Leave us." And Cressida, pale now, her smile finally gone, gathered her gray silks and went. But at the door she paused, and without turning, she said, very softly, in a voice meant for no one, "You were never supposed to find her. He promised us the ground was salted." She was gone before Varric could ask what she meant. But the door to the sealed east wing, somewhere deep in his memory, had begun to rattle in earnest now. And this time, it did not go still again. Varric stopped sleeping. Each time he closed his eyes, the same fragments came for him: silver trees, snow that fell without cold, a woman's low, bright laugh, a pair of scarred hands folded warm in his own, and each time he woke, reaching for something that was already gone, his wolf pacing and grieving inside him for a loss it could name, and he could not. By day he wore the mask of a working king. The investigation was moving now, and moving fast. The two dead men in the wash-house had carried no crests, but their blades were forged in the regent's own armory, stamped beneath the guard, with a mark Thurston had believed no common eye would ever read. A steward remembered a purse of crown silver paid out 3 nights before the attack, to no ledger and no name. A stable hand recalled a gray-cloaked woman who came and went from the servants' quarter by the frost gate that only the highest of the court could open. Gray silk, river pearls, Cressida. Varric read the reports until the candles guttered and felt nothing move him. Not the wedding 9 days off, not the council's letters, not the endless business of a kingdom. Only one thing held him now, and it was a room he had never once in his life been permitted to enter. The sealed east wing. He had walked past its locked doors 10,000 times as a boy, and been told always in the same low voice that it held only grief and dust, and the crown's old sorrows, and that a good son did not go looking for either. He had believed it the way children believe the walls of the only house they know. He believed it no longer. He went at the dead hour, alone, and broke the ancient lock with his bare hand. Dust rose in the moonlight like disturbed snow. And there, along the far wall, hung a row of tapestries, every one of which had been turned to face the stone, their images hidden, their backs a blank gray field of thread. His father had done this, or his father had been made to. Varric took the nearest by its edge and turned it to the light. A wolf looked back at him, white. Pure white, woven in threads of silver and pearl, standing beneath a full moon on a field of snow, and around its throat, worked in tiny, careful stitches, a mark shaped like a 7-pointed star. The same star that had been burned into Sorrel's shoulder to hide it. His breath left him. He turned the next, and the whole sealed history of the North unrolled before him in the dark, a great pale line of moon-blessed wolves, kings and mothers and children with eyes the color of frost, the house of the White Wolf, the oldest and most sacred blood in Ashenmoor, and then, in the final panel fire, a hall in flames, the white wolves burning, and standing at the edge of the blaze, watching it, a young man in duxbane gray, with a torch in his hand and cold satisfaction on his face. Varric knew that face. He had seen it every day of his childhood, bending down to teach him honor Thurston. 30 years ago, before Varric was born, his uncle had put the sacred line to the torch and salted the ground, and every soul at court had agreed, ever after, to remember it as a tragedy. The white wolves had simply ended, the way winters end. No hand, no blame, no name. Yet the final tapestry held one thing: the fire had not taken. At the edge of the burning hall, half hidden in the woven smoke, a woman in white pressed a swaddled bundle into the arms of a fleeing servant, a single infant, carried out of the slaughter while the rest of the line burned. The stitching was small and desperate and easy to miss. 30 years old, an infant then, a grown woman now, with scars down her cheek and a child of her own. Sorrel. The last ember of a fire everyone swore had gone cold. A footstep whispered on the stone behind him. Varric turned. Captain Rydian stood in the broken doorway, ashen, a lantern shaking in his fist. "Majesty," he breathed, "you must come. It's the woman, Sorrel." She took the child and ran for the frost gate. An hour passed. He swallowed. "And Majesty." The regent's men rode out after her, armed. He gave the order himself. Varric rode as he had never ridden in his life, and still he was very nearly too late. He found them at the tree line, where the palace grounds gave way to the deep silver forest. The same forest, some drowned part of him whispered, from every dream he could not hold. Sorrel had gone to ground with her back against a great white oak. Wren shoved behind her into the roots, and around them, in a slow closing ring, rode 6 of the regent's men with steel already drawn. She was wounded, half-healed, unarmed, and she stood between her child and 6 blades as though she were a wall of stone. "The regent sends his regrets," the lead rider was saying, almost gently. "The line was meant to end 30 years ago. He does so hate an unfinished thing." "Then come and finish it," Sorrel said. Her voice did not shake. "But I promise you this: you'll not touch her. While I breathe, you never have, you never will." The rider sighed, and lifted his sword, and spurred his horse straight at the child, and Sorrel broke. Varric was still 50 yards out, screaming her name into the wind when it happened, and afterward he would spend the rest of his life trying to describe a thing that had no words. Light poured off her. Not fire, not flame. Moonlight, as though the full moon overhead had reached down and struck her like a bell. The scars up her arms and throat blazed silver white, and then were simply gone, unmade, and where a broken servant girl had stood there, rose, in one breathless unfolding, a wolf, a white wolf. Vast, luminous, terrible, and beautiful, beyond anything living, pure as new snow, her eyes twin moons, the 7-pointed star burning bright at her throat. She stood taller at the shoulder than any wolf Varric had seen in a lifetime of war, and the light did not merely shine off her, it seemed to come from within her, as though she had swallowed a piece of the moon long ago, and it had never stopped burning. The whole forest went white, with the light of her snow, leapt up from the ground where her paws struck and hung glittering in the air. The regent's horses screamed and reared. The men flung up their arms against the glare, and their brave, ugly certainty curdled all at once into terror because they had been sent to put down a scarred servant and had found instead a legend, alive and furious, and lit like a star. And the last white wolf of Ashenmoor fell upon them, like the wrath of the moon herself. It was over in seconds. The riders scattered into the trees, those who could still ride, leaving their leader broken in the snow. The great white wolf wheeled, placed her huge body between the fallen and her child, and stood there blazing in the dark, sides heaving, magnificent and alone. Varric reined in hard and could not move, could not breathe, because the sight of her, the white wolf under the silver trees, the moon caught living in her fur, had reached into the locked room at the back of his skull and torn the door clean off its hinges, and everything came back at once. 6 years ago, not 30 chapter his, a hunt gone wrong, a fall, a wound, waking lost and fevered in a woodcutter's abandoned croft at the edge of the world. A young woman with scars down her cheek who found him there and did not know he was a king, who fed him and argued with him and healed him and made him laugh, really laugh, for the first time in his armored life. Snow and smoke and low, bright laughter. And then, beneath the full moon, in a forest, exactly like this one, she had shown him her truth, had let the moonlight take her and become this same impossible white wolf, and his own wolf had risen up and known her instantly, wholly, forever. Mate, he remembered the promise. Their hands joined, silver light on their skin, both of them young and certain and unafraid. No matter what comes for us, no matter how far, we will always find the road back to each other. He remembered meaning it with everything he was. He remembered riding home to tell his uncle he would take no highborn Luna, that he had found his mate, a survivor of the old line, alive against all the world's cruelty. And he remembered the cup Thurston had pressed into his hand that night, the warmth spreading, the floor rising. His uncle's voice and Cressida's murmuring above him that he was confused, that he was ill, that there had never been any woman, any wolf, any promise. Nothing. Nothing. There was nothing there at all. He remembered fighting to hold onto her name, as it was drawn out of him like a splinter from a wound. He remembered losing 6 years. While he forgot, she had remembered every hour of it. She had already been carrying his child when he rode away and never returned. She had borne their daughter alone in a freezing croft, and carried her into a world that wanted them both dead. She had burned the star off her own skin, so that Thurston's hunters would not know the line still lived. She had scrubbed the floors of the very man who had promised to come back and never came, waiting by the road, night after night, for someone who had smiled in her face and called her a scarred servant and laughed. Varric came down off his horse and into the snow on his knees. The great white wolf turned her moon eyes on him, and slowly, in a fall of silver light, she was Sorrel again, swaying, spent, her scars returned, gathering Wren up against her. "You remember," she said. It was not a question. She had seen it break across his face. "After all this time, now you remember." "Sorrel, don't." Her voice cracked straight down the middle. "Do you know what I told myself every night to keep from hating you? That you were dead. That only death could keep you from us. Because the only thing worse than a dead mate," her breath tore, "was a living one who chose to forget. They took it from me." He could barely speak. "I swear it. On the moon. They poisoned it out of me. I never once chose to leave you. I know." She said it so quietly it undid him more than any scream. "I know that now. I felt the lie. The moment I saw your face in that washhouse. You truly didn't know me. And do you understand, Varric, that knowing the truth is worse? Because now I can't even have my hatred. Now all I have left is what they stole." Tears ran silver down the ruined side of her face. 6 years. Our daughter learned to walk on a floor you should have been standing on. And you were here, sleeping soundly in the house of the men who did it. Wren looked up from her mother's arms, silver eyes moving between them, and asked in a small, clear voice, "Mama, is that him? Is that the one you wait for on the road?" Sorrel closed her eyes. "Yes, little bird," she whispered. "That's him. That's your father. He came back." Varric did not sleep that night either, but the wakefulness was different now. It was not the ache of a locked door. It was the ache of an open one, and everything terrible that had come pouring through. He sat alone in the cold before dawn, and for the first time since he was a boy, the Alpha King of Ashenmore wept, quietly, without dignity, in the way of a man mourning years he could never buy back. He made himself count them. He made himself feel every one. While Sorrel had labored alone in a freezing croft to bring their daughter into the world, with no hand to hold and no healer to call, he had been here in silk and firelight, believing he had chosen wisely to wed a high-born woman, while Sorrel had scarred her own shoulder to hide the star that would have marked their child for the hunters. He had been here laughing at his uncle's table. While Sorrel had taught Wren to make herself small, to hide in cupboards, to swallow her crying so the men in the walls would not find her, he had been here ruling a kingdom, at peace, remembering nothing. While Wren had learned to whisper a man into her pillow, because saying his name aloud would break her mother in half, he had been here, passing that same broken woman in the corridors and calling her a scar and a scrubbing brush, and laughing, while his mate had watched the road every single night for 6 years, trusting a promise made under the moon, then doubting it, then grieving it, then hating it. He had been here, warm, safe, whole, living out the quiet, comfortable, stolen life they had built for him over the bodies of everyone he loved. He thought of every small kindness he had believed he'd earned in those 6 years, every peaceful morning, every untroubled night, and understood, now that not one of them had been his, they had been paid for. Someone had bled for each of them in a cold croft at the edge of the world, and he had spent them without even knowing their price. The refrain circled in him like a wolf around a fire, and it did not burn down to anger. Not yet. It burned down to something colder and far more dangerous. The still, clear resolve of a man who has finally understood the exact shape of what was done to him, and by whom. His wolf was not pacing now. His wolf had gone silent, the silence of a drawn bowstring, the silence that comes just before the loosing. At dawn, Varric rose and washed the tears from his face and dressed himself in black. Then he sent for his uncle. Thurston came expecting a nephew. He found, behind the desk in the cold study, a king he had never met, and on the desk between them, laid out in neat and silent rows, 30 years of proof, forged death records, bribed healers' seals, a ledger of crown silver, paid to killers, a transfer order moving a scarred under-hall servant into the palace 6 years past, signed in the regent's own careful hand. And beside it all, turned face out for the first time in 3 decades, a single white wolf tapestry with a man in duskbane gray, holding a torch to a burning hall. Thurston looked at it for a long moment. When he lifted his gaze, he did not bother, any longer, to hide anything at all. "So," he said, "you turned the tapestries around. I always said your father should have burned them. Sentiment. It runs in the softer branch of the family. You murdered them." Varric's voice was very quiet, an entire sacred line. "Children." "I ended a rival," Thurston corrected, unhurried, settling into the chair across from his king, as though they were discussing a harvest. "The white wolves were older than us, purer than us, loved better than us. So long as one drew breath, the Duskbanes were usurpers wearing another house's crown. I merely finished what history had already decided. I thought I had. I did not know one squalling infant had been carried out of that hall in a servant's arms. Not until 6 years ago, when you rode home glowing like a boy and told me you'd found her, so you took her out of my head." Cressida's notion, the poison, a clever girl, he said it almost fondly. She'd wanted the crown since she could walk, and I wanted the last of that cursed line to die forgotten and nameless, with no king to shield her. Your marriage served us both. All it required was that you forget one servant girl. He shrugged. You forgot her beautifully. For 6 years, you passed her in the halls and felt nothing but a faint distaste. I confess I enjoyed that part. Varric's control did not break. That was the thing that finally frightened his uncle, that it did not break. The windows did not shatter, his voice did not rise. He only leaned forward and let the full weight of the alpha into a single question, soft as falling snow. "And my daughter, you sent armed men after a child in the dark because her eyes were the wrong color." For the first time, something flickered in Thurston's face. Not remorse. Calculation, the dawning understanding of a gambler who has just seen the true size of the table. "A loose end," he said more carefully now. nothing personal. Any king would. The doors opened. Cressida swept in radiant, already speaking. Varric, my love. Whatever your uncle has told you, I can. She saw the tapestry. She saw the ledgers. She saw the face of the man she was to marry, and she saw that he remembered, and every word died in her throat. I can explain, she whispered. No, said Varec. You can't. Auntie rose from the desk, and the study filled slowly with the cold pressure of his power, until the fire itself bent low in the grate, and both of the people who had stolen his life took an involuntary step back from the king they had made. They had built a wedding. 9 days of banners had gone up across the palace, silver and gray, and beneath the great open sky of the courtyard, the whole of the north had gathered to watch their Alpha King take Cressida of the Highfell, as his Luna beneath the first full moon of winter. Nobles, pack elders, warriors, the common folk crowded at the gates, all of them certain they had come to a wedding, not one of them knew they had come to a reckoning. Cressida stood upon the ceremonial dais in cloth of silver, luminous, triumphant, certain even now that Varric's silence these 2 days had meant surrender, that he would do what a king does, and choose the crown and let the past stay buried. Thurston stood at the dais edge in his regent's grey, watchful. A man who had won this same game 100 times. Varric climbed the steps in black. The elder lifted his staff. Beneath the blessing of the moon we gather to bind, stop. The word rolled out across the courtyard on a wave of alpha power that pressed every head in that vast crowd down like grass beneath wind. The music died. Cressida's radiant smile froze on her face. I will not be wed today, Varric said. His voice carried to the farthest gate. And before the moon that made me, this kingdom will hear the truth its crown has hidden for 30 years. He told them, all of it. The massacre of the White Wolves, by the man who had ruled them as regent, the one infant carried living from the fire, the survivor of that sacred line, hunted her whole life, hiding her mark in her own burned flesh. The king who had found her, and loved her, and taken her as his true moon-blessed mate, and the poison poured into that king by his own blood and his own betrothed, to steal 6 years a mate and a child, so that a false Luna could wear a stolen crown. The courtyard came apart in an ocean of noise, and into the noise Varric turned to Cressida. You knew what he was, he said. You knew what they did to that line, and you poisoned me anyway, and you sent men after my daughter. You have wanted to be Luna your whole life. His gray eyes were pitiless. Look well. This is the closest you will ever come. She fell to her knees in her silver gown. Varric, I love you. You love the crown. He did not raise his voice. Every time you say that word, I remember my mate scarring her own body to keep our child alive. He lifted his head and let the full alpha ring out over the thousands. Cressida of the Highfell. I reject you, before the moon and this whole kingdom, wholly and forever. The false bond that had never truly formed, shattered, like river ice in a thaw. Cressida crumpled with a broken cry, stripped in an instant of title, of future, of everything, the humiliation total, and public, and beyond any recovering. You will leave my territory before the moon sets, Varric said, and you will not return while you live. Then he turned to his uncle. Thurston had not knelt. He stood straight in his gray, the architect of 30 years of murder, and he met his nephew's eyes without shame. And that in the end was his undoing, because there was nothing in that face for a king to spare. Uncle. The word fell like a stone into deep water. For the slaughter of the White Wolves, for the poisoning of your king, for 6 years, stolen from your own blood, and for the men you sent against a child. Varric's voice never rose, and somehow that was the most terrible thing of all. I strip you of your name, your lands, and your protection. You are cast out of the pack, beyond every border I command. From this hour, you are rogue, and no hand in the north will be raised to shelter you. To be cast out, nameless, packless, alone beneath the open moon, was, for a wolf, a sentence heavier than death. The crowd knew it. Thurston knew it. For the first time in 30 years, the cold certainty drained out of the old man's face and left something small and gray and afraid behind. A low sound moved through the assembled thousands. Then, not a cheer, but something deeper and older, the sound of a whole people remembering a grief they had been forbidden to name. Here and there among the pack elders, gray heads bowed. Some of the oldest had been alive 30 years before. Some had stood in a different courtyard on a different night and watched a sacred house burn and told themselves ever after that no one had lit the fire. Now, the truth stood plain before them, under the winter moon, and the shame of their long silence moved through them like a cold wind. The guards closed around him. And through the parting crowd, drawn by the roar, came a scarred woman in a plain gray dress with a silver-eyed child on her hip, Sorrel, who had scrubbed these very stones unseen for 6 years, walking now through a courtyard full of kneeling nobles who could not tear their eyes from her. She did not gloat, she did not smile, she only climbed the dais and stood at last, in the open, beneath the moon, in the light. Varric turned to his kingdom and lifted his daughter's small hand in his. "This," he said, "is the last daughter of the White Wolf, and she is under the protection of this crown until the mountains fall." 10,000 wolves knelt in the snow. The reckoning did not heal them. Varric was wise enough, now, to know that it couldn't. Sorrel did not stay for the cheering. When it was over, she took Ren and went back, not to a cottage this time, but to a quiet set of rooms in the eastern light. The sealed wing thrown open at last, its turned tapestries hung facing outward so her daughter might grow up knowing her own face in her own history. But she went alone, and Varric understood that a rejected ceremony and a public justice could give a woman back her name, and her safety, and her line, and still not give her back 6 years. So he did the only thing left to a man who had everything and had squandered it. He began again, from nothing, and he did not once ask her to hurry. He came every day, not as a king, just as Varric, the man who had missed it all. He learned that Ren's first word had not been mama or papa, but moon, spoken up at the window one night while her mother watched the road. He learned that she had walked it 10 months in a freezing croft, and that Sorrel had cried, alone, because there had been no one to tell. He learned every birthday he had not been at, every fever he had not sat up through, every small, ordinary miracle that had happened in the dark while he slept warm and forgetting. He held each one carefully, the way you hold something you have no right to and have been given anyway, and slowly, slowly, the ice on the road began to thaw. One evening, near the winter's end, they sat on the eastern steps, the 3 of them, watching the sun go gold behind the silver trees. Ren was drawing wolves, as she always was, a whole pale pack of them now, none of them alone at the edge of the page anymore. She looked up at Varric, with her mother's moon-bright eyes. "If you loved Mama," she said, in the merciless, honest way of the very young, "why did you stay away so long?" The old answer rose in him. "They took it from me. I never chose. It wasn't my fault." And he let it die unspoken, because he had learned that it changed nothing that mattered. He had not been there. That was the only fact a child could hold. "I wanted to come back," he said, and his voice broke on it. "Every day, little bird, some part of me was looking for a road it couldn't remember. I am so sorry I took so long to find it." Ren considered this gravely. Then she scooted along the cold step until her small shoulder was pressed warm against his side, and she went back to her drawing as though nothing at all had happened. It was not forgiveness. Not the whole of it, not yet, but it was a place to begin. Varric looked up. Across the little space between them, Sorrel was watching. The ruined side of her face, and the whole of it, the last white wolf, and the scarred servant both. And her eyes were wet, and she did not look away from him, she did not smile. but she did not build the wall back up either. She only reached out, after a moment, and rested her scarred hand on the step between them, palm up, open, not taking his hand. Not yet. And after 6 stolen years, an open road felt very much like a miracle. Beneath them, the moon rose full and white over Ashenmoor, and for the first time in a very long time, it did not shine down on a woman waiting alone. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and for walking every step of Sorrel Varric and Little Wren's journey home. If their story reached something in your heart the way it reached mine, take a moment to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, so you'll never miss the next tale when the moon is full. And before you go, I would love to know, where, in this wide world, are you listening from tonight? Tell me your country, your city, or just your own quiet corner of it. Down in the comments, I read every single one, and it always amazes me how far our little story family reaches. Until we meet again, be gentle with yourselves, and may the moon light every road that leads you home.